sorry. So I want to just update this real quick just to make sure we're all on the same page. So I'm going to order by, after I union the tags, I'm going to order by that. And I'm also going to call distinct. Yep.
Wouldn't it be better to have the order by after the distinct, because then we'll be ordering less things?
So that's the one thought. So here's the deal. So you can do them in either order. You'll get the same result. Yes. If you stick the order by a second, then you're ordering on less data. Okay. The other thing that happens though is the distinct is faster if you order it first. So there's a trade-off. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the distinct is actually faster if you do the order first. The order by is potentially faster if you do the distinct first, right? So there's a trade-off there. Which one in reality in a real-world scenario is the fastest is really something you have to measure on a case-by-case basis. So in some cases it may be that the other way is faster. I'm going to guess that more than likely, I haven't done enough testing on this myself, I'm going to guess more than likely, though, the order by case is actually faster if you do order by and then distinct. But I could be wrong about that. That's just what my intuition tells me. Okay. So that's what we have there. The thing I want to integrate in here is a spell checker. So I want to add that part in. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to let me close that. So I'm going to right-click on the project. I'm going to go to the NuGet Package Manager. Okay. We want to install a spell checker. The name of that spell checker, you can look for Hunspell, H-U-N-S-P-E-L-L. Make sure you're under the Browse tab. And the one we want to install is this NHunspell. Okay. So that's the package we want to get in there. Now, one thing that this is going to do, it's going to install a pair of DLLs. Our ignore rule that we set up at the beginning of class, ignore DLLs. So if we just leave that as is, we upload it, those DLLs won't actually get added to Git, which means that no other developers will actually be able to use this, be able to work. So one thing we need to know to do, I'm going to right-click on the project, the Sports Store project. There's an option in here called Open Folder and File Explorer. That's going to get me to the actual folder on File Explorer. So what you're going to look for, you should have these two DLLs there, Hunspell x64 and Hunspell 86. You need to make sure that those get added to Git. Okay. So by default, you see I've already checked them in, so I've got a green by there, but you're probably not going to see any icon. So you want to select both of those, and then you're going to right-click, say Tortoise Git, and you should have an option to add. So you're going to right-click and say Tortoise Add. That should give you a little blue plus next to those two libraries.
Do you say OK or commit?
You're going to say Add. After looking into... Oh, no, you just close that. Just hit OK.
No, blue plus.
So you should see a blue plus there. That's fine. That just means that it's going to add those to Git once you do a commit. But you don't need to do a commit right now. Have you added those two DLLs, Ben? Go through that and then we'll do the next thing. Once you've got the DLLs added, you want to go out to inside Renton. I posted a zip file called dictionary files. There's two files in there that you need. Those are just two files that I pulled from LibreOffice. This version of Hunspell is compatible with a few different applications use Hunspell. So you can grab their
Right,
manual
so-
dictionaries for those.
After installing, I add those.
Yeah, so have you installed it?
Where do
Not
you,
yet.
Okay, yeah, you need to install the NuGet package first.
where do you put the dictionary?
So drop them into that same folder. Just where we have the DLLs, drop them into that same folder.
The
And
AF,
you're also gonna,
the
yep,
FF
and you're gonna
DLC.
right click those and say add as well.
Okay, already added.
They're not added yet, because there's no icon on them. So select them, right click, say tortoise get.
In that same sports store file? Whenever you right click and
Didn't
you
do
do
have the icon.
add,
It hasn't updated yet.
or
Just hit
right
tortoise
click
get added.
open folder and files.
There it is.
Did you already download the dictionary?
Yeah.
And then I guess just throw it in
No,
that
it's just, it
file
doesn't
and open.
like giving them the icon, I guess.
Okay, yeah, it may be bugged out. So if you look in your Team Explorer in Visual Studio, what you should see is that those 4 files are keyed up.
So mine don't show, like they don't show in plus.
Okay.
But like,
But if you go to Team Explorer, that's the way to be sure. If you go to Changes, they should be listed. So there's the 2 that are being added. That's fine. You also need the ones that are for the 2 positions.
okay, where do we drop the dictionary? We just drop.
That same folder. You can see I've got the AFF file and the DIC file. I've got them in the same folder.
Mine was in unit 2 lab. But I just dropped them in there.
Did you get that? Those added?
Yeah, they're all there.
Untitled.
So everybody still working on getting those files, the 4 files added? Get all those added? Just here. This one is your mouse, right?
Yeah.
Can I, there's a quicker way to get there. And that's what I was trying to show you. So if you just right click on the project and say open folder file explorer, that will take you directly there. So you've got these 2 files. You still need the ENUSAFF and the dictionary file. You're going to get those from the inside right there. They'll be under the main page right next to the handout.
Are these the same files we'll need in our, last?
Yeah. That's where you're going to put those. Yeah, you need to unzip them. You can unzip them and then so make sure you add them to version control. So same way you did with those 2 DLLs, you're going to select them and then right click and say. That way they get queued up. Did you get those files added? Yeah, and then make sure you queue those up to be added.
Oh, here.
So you should have the 4 files that I've selected on screen. Ideally, all 4 of those are selected to be added. They should all be there. Now, one thing we need to do, going back to Visual Studio Land, we want to actually queue those dictionary files to be deployed when we run the application. So you'll see that the DLLs here are already in the project, but you'll notice that those 2 dictionary files are not. So if we go up and pick Sports Store, I'm going to click this Show All Files button in the top right. Okay, once I click that, we're going to see those files here. You see them kind of grayed out? Now hold Control, select both those files, right-click, and say Include in Project. Okay. So once you've included them in Project, we need to right-click them and go to Properties, because there's a few things we need to change. We want to make sure both of these are set to Content, and we want to make sure both of these are set to Copy Always. Or Copy if newer. Copy if newer is fine.
Rebuild mine. I don't see the dictionary. I see the.
Remember, you have to hit that Show All Files button.
Right, mine
So both of these should show up as Content, Copy if newer.
Oh, yeah.
What that does is it tells it to copy it to the output directory anytime you do a build. And specifically to copy it over if it's newer than the file that's there.
That's just the two dictionary files, not that NHunspell.
They should already be set that way.
Right.
If you go to properties on them, they should already be set.
Where did the NHunspell?
They're right there. So
They should
if
be
you
set.
look at properties, see?
Right.
And you go to properties on the dictionary.
Yep. So you go to properties on both of the files, the AFF file and the dictionary file. And you want to make sure you set both of those to Content, Copy if newer.
Yeah, I included them, but then I'm gonna move on to.
And now you can go to properties on them. Drag the properties over to the left.
So, assign it to properties, make sure it says content, and just make sure it says copy.
So you should have this as content. You see there, do not copy. You should change
From the scripts.
You have to hit the so go back up to source code.
Copy it from there.
I mean, I have, there's a new project. There's a new paper. Yeah, but you can just see it.
Okay. It'll show up.
I'm pretty sure it's like this.
Everywhere in your
I mean, because if you look at the scripts in my handout, it's not like it's coming. It's not coming from the content folder, the scripts folder, it's coming from the content folder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Correct.
The drag.
That's gonna be a problem.
Yeah. So include in project first. And do that first. So you have to include it in the project, and then you can right click and change the properties.
That's the first thing I look for.
And you want to drag this over here so you can see it.
Oh, you found the properties page.
Yeah, too.
Drop it to the left. There. See that? So that's just a general, like, hey, this is where we bring in additional files to be made as part of our build. All right, so now that we've got that set up, we want to go to the product controller, and we want to look at this keywords method again, okay? So in here, after I figure out the tags, I'm going to put in some code to work with the spell checker. Copy it from here.
So like if you had multiple text boxes, it would just, that would apply to any text box that was using term?
What do you mean?
Like you don't apply it to a specific text box, you just apply it to term, the spell checking?
We're not directly working with this, an input box here. Remember, this web service is backing that search field, that search box, right? So where term comes from, this code doesn't really know. This code really has no idea where term is coming from. So looking at this code, so the first thing that we're doing here, we're creating an instance of this Untitled object, right? And this Untitled object is what's going to do the actual spell checking for us. In that process, we have to tell it the name or the path to these two different files. So it's the AFF file and the .dic. Because we don't, because we haven't specified a path in there, it's going to try and look in basically the directory where it's running. Okay, so that's where that stands. Okay, so these are the two files that we're using. If we're using different dictionary files, we need to put those file names in there. as far as what we're doing on this line of code, so there's a few things happening. So first of all, we have spelling.spellTerm, and that returns a true or false to say, is it correct? Is it correctly spelled or is it incorrectly spelled? So that's going to return true if this term that we've typed in is a valid word, and it's going to return false if it's not. So if it is a valid word, we're saying, okay, we've got a ternary here. So if it does come back as a valid word, we're just going to make a list that's going to have that single term in that you typed in. Okay, it's a valid word. If it's not a valid word, then we ask for some suggestions. So .suggest gives us suggestions about, okay, you misspelled it, what terms might it be instead? And part of the reason why we're doing a ternary here instead of saying just .suggest, from testing it, so let's say I typed in water, if I just go directly to suggest, that suggestion actually usually doesn't include water. It doesn't include the correct spelling. So that's where I'm using this, only if it's invalid, because otherwise it doesn't include the valid term that you typed in. So I'm going to say only if it's invalid, then grab these suggestions. That suggestions comes back as quite a few sometimes, especially if you only have like only have a small number of characters in there. It can give you quite a few suggestions. So that's where I'm just saying, well, let's just keep 5 of those suggestions. That just keeps the scroll bar, the drop down from being too large. Otherwise, there's just a bunch of options that aren't all that helpful. Okay, so that's all that does. The number 5 is a little bit arbitrary. You could use anything else. You could say, I want the top 10, I want the top 9. Whatever number you put there is up to you. But I just picked 5 because that kind of gave me the results I wanted. So that's what that does, right? So in the end, what are we getting here for suggestions? Suggestions is an IEnumerable of strings, right? You can see that? So, and the reason it's an IEnumerable, suggest does return a list of strings, right? And we do have a list of strings here. But when I call take gives me an IEnumerable of strings. It doesn't give me a list of strings. So that's where suggestions is going to be an IEnumerable. But that's okay for us, okay? So we want to take that. That's giving us the suggestions. We'd like to combine them with the results that are already there. Does that make sense? I'd like to give the suggestions back to the user as well, okay? Now, the way I do that, I have a few different options, okay? One way I could do that is I could union that in with here. If I union that in with the other ones, with the categories and the split tags, then they'll just be mixed in there and I can easily remove any duplicates. The downside of doing that is now I don't know which ones are my spell check results versus what are my other results. And usually I want to give the user some sort of hint about that. So what I'm actually going to want to do here, I'm actually want the suggestions, the spell check suggestions, to happen first before all the others. Okay? Does that make sense? I'm going to give you the spell check suggestions first before all the other results. So to do that, remember we looked at this yesterday. To combine 2 lists, you can use union. The way that union works is whatever you put here first is the first thing that's going to be in there. Okay? So if I say results, and I say results is equal to results dot union suggestions, what you're going to see if I write it this way is that those results from the database happen first, and then the suggestions from the spell checker happen second. That may be what you want in some cases, right? But the other way versus if you switch it around the other way, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say results is equal to suggestions dot union results. If I run it in this fashion, then the suggestions are going to be first. You see that? So this would be the results first, and then the suggestions, or the suggestions first and then the results. You can do it in either way. Really all depends on what you're trying to get to. I'm doing it after the order by, because if I did it before the order by, then it would just be back and reordered by alphabetically. But I want to kind of have them distinct. Here's the spell check results, and here's the other results from the database. Okay. So let's say we have that. Let's go run that. Go look here. Okay, so if I, for instance, type in water, you can see how it's kind of given me these suggestions. Now, it's interesting. There it is. Right, so I'm still only getting, if I type in water, I get water and water sports. If I type in water, I'm going to get suggestions there. The spell checker says like, well, water, where, treat, those are similar to what you typed in. See how that's working? Yes.
When I brought in those two dictionary files,
Yep.
my properties didn't give me the options to change it to.
You still haven't included them in your project. You can't change any properties until you include them in your project.
Oh, so I showed the files and I have to.
You have to include the
Include project. Okay.
and then you change them.
That's why.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I got 500 error.
So it's still saying what?
You get the file.
Okay. So one thing you may be getting. Yep.
So I'm getting a 500 error when I type.
Yeah. So let me go, because there's a yeah. Yeah, if you look under networking, you'll see the error. Let me go change it, because I forgot I made that fix already. This PC, program files. Let me actually open up my handout so I remember the right folder that I put those in. Actually, there it is, IS Express. So the reason it's working for me is because I've already done this step. I'm going to just delete these a second. Okay, so there we go. So you may be getting no suggestions because there's another step we need to do. We can kind of diagnose that if we go to the network tab, as you're saying. If you look here, can you see what it's saying? AFF file not found. And specifically, you can see where it's looking for it, right? So it's looking for these two files in C program files x86, IS Express. So we need to copy both of those files into that folder. You only need to do that once, though. Because that'll be then there the next time you work with this. So we'll take both of those files, copy them into C program files x86 IIS Express. And then it should work for you. The dictionary files. that and those files.
You break the slate.
It's gonna warn you that you need to be an administrator to do that.
I sure am.
I'll hope so.
I go to network, or like try to test out everything, I go to network. Let me see, where it's at.
You're in the program files, you need these program files like CD6. You don't need those there, but you need to get the program files.
Yeah, I was not trying to go to Washington. That's what spellchecker did. Yeah, right. Hello, Brendan. What are you doing for me?
Oh.
Oh, really?
Oh, you're doing this stuff. You see DLC? You see DLC. You got it.
Yeah, I do. What's wrong? What a network protect the center. Yeah, there's nothing.
Rebuild solution.
So you're not getting errors. If you're getting results, you're not getting errors there.
So type in some more stuff.
Sure. We'll type stuff.
Okay,
You
see how that's
see
in
if
red?
there's a network error.
So click on that. See, it says file not.
Yeah, okay, so there's no error.
Right, so you need to copy the two dictionary files into there. See program files x86, IS Express.
What were you getting? What was that result that showed up? Wait.
See that? So you need to copy it.
Yeah.
But that file, program file,
So
IS,
it's not
it's not anything to do with.
What is this? Go ahead.
No. Where does it say? That's where it's looking for.
Yeah, where's looking for this one?
There you go.
So go back to the I don't know if you move them up to the top of the
I am gonna go
See it saying,
No, they're from my dad. They're from my
Yeah.
Oh, he's coming. They're my parents are both. Whatever. My dad retired and now they can just post him all the time. How was that?
I was in the very, very poor part of the
What were you doing? I need a 12-mission trip.
That was like entrepreneurship. So Philip invited me works out of the state. So they sent us into countries like that, Haiti, and we go in and we train people that need business package.
Oh,
It's really cool. Trying to change those things. And that script
Because
is
people like going and take money and it just kills their economy.
right.
Like Michigan doctors are great, but then their doctors don't exist.
Uh-huh.
Because their economy for all the doctors in the economy. And so we want to train people.
Yeah, I'm good.
working.
So we just work with a bunch of people that just
Okay, cool.
Was that's what you for your major pretty much, right? That was your Well, I thought your bachelor's was like
garden kind of stuff.
I thought it was like developed.
It's like organization, but some kind of, I guess.
No, sorry, you saw short. But
So you got that.
Yeah. So they can like support their
Yeah, you need to have
families,
it,
like
like,
long term.
Which is weird because
The week that where they're bringing them shoes.
You really want to move it.
teaching me fish instead of getting.
Right, yeah.
And
Phil's thing is, we don't just want to teach them to fish, we want to help them start a fish farm.
Yeah, there you go.
And then they can help the kids with fish.
overpriced.
Do not include that. Do not-
Overpriced their
Just because it's right now, do not include it.
Philip's the guy that's
Have all
like,
sorts of problems. So
Okay. That's what I figured.
He quit the Pentagon.
If you include that, you will have nothing.
That's awesome though.
Do not do that.
That's like
So,
access
you
and
get
clear set.
all four of those files back. Because now you're
He's
missing.
getting invited like all over the projects. They just got back from Dubai.
That's awesome.
Did you see the? Oh, never mind. Oh, another thing. Not really excited for this.
Okay, so let's read.
My started
Oh,
talking.
look.
Started talking.
ENUS
Not just
underscore.
casual.
Needs to be dotted.
I think
See,
it's confusing.
must be.
It's right there.
Oh,
every spot.
See there.
So like, I have to pay her.
So,
Oh, you have to pay her though. It's like a free.
Well, I think it's like the spa gets some, but it's like union place that everything they work is really cheap. You get to sign like some waivers saying, oh, I acknowledge that these people are students still. But then I'm expecting to enter to them.
Now, why is it not showing that silent?
But I want to start dating her again. So
I
I'm like stuck in this spot where I'm like, do I?
Dude, that's just picture.
Right, I'm just paying for lessons.
Nancy assessment.
That's your opportunity to go in and flower.
Oh, you don't have a dot.
Did I tell you what? Oh, maybe.
You know, your classes are wrong. So
Sorry,
it's
that's
dot,
true for all
you
my
want,
friends.
dash.
Let's talk about how we started talking again.
It has to be specifically.
I think I
So
did.
remember the dot at
Kind
the
of, but
beginning?
it's fine.
Says, the dot at the beginning says that this is a
What was
class.
yesterday? Or 2 days
And
ago?
if you have another
Well,
dot in
you
there,
told me
you're saying those are two different.
Yeah, that's what sparked it up. It was,
Let's
we were
refresh
really
it to
just,
see if we fix
I
it.
was just, when I get bored, when I'm single, I just shot and swipe on Tinder, just to see what shows up. And I happen to match with the best friend, we just ended up sending office names to each other. And then she told my advisor, I think it was just a territorial thing, about bungle women, you know? Yeah, like,
Let's
they're-
do a hard
they're
one.
like
So
attention
control
to
F5.
That's the worst.
Make sure it's-
and it's the worst, I'll tell you that.
That's the worst part about you. I hated it.
There it goes. So we're still using the previous.
I never called it after that stuff happened.
Mhm.
Forgot.
For some reason, one mine was missing.
Was it that's not clear?
One of the high schools, and we got more.
Start getting
You know,
It shouldn't be Unspelled idea, that's the wrong name for it.
I didn't change that name.
I like it.
Shouldn't change any names to Eric.
So if I want to see what's
But you don't need things.
It's not that bad with Maya.
So.
They're friends, they hang out a lot, but like, Smile
So we're
would
gonna
be
delete
kind
that
of
because you have it wrong, that's not
give
even.
us time. You know what I'm saying? Like, but like they're like, when there's no
Don't
separation,
do things
they're
from the.
terrible. That's like she's afraid to be alone with you or something.
Never
Let's
come
not
in
go
here.
one at my house. But if we went at my house, we wouldn't go.
Let's do some work.
She was always.
So let's go back to
She can't live in the day. She was in the town.
manage
Well, she
the
worked in the day. So she'd see
what it
her.
needs to do is it needs to figure
So if
out.
I want to see her, I see
64 bit or the 86 bit.
compulsive liar.
So what you had to
She's
do
like
is.
10 to let you. So I have to sit there and do all of this.
Okay, so install,
I'm the type that's like,
go back here, Unspell.
I couldn't do that. My girlfriend does.
We have a buddy member who's like that.
So we need to
Not real
uninstall.
close with his, like not as close with people as like we got each other, you know what I'm saying? His name's Drew. And every time he
Nope,
tells a
nope,
story,
nope, 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 nope.
True or Drew? And he
No,
gets
just
so
do not
pissed
jump
off,
in on-
because they'd be like
Yeah, so we
outrageous,
just
like,
uninstall.
no way that actually happened.
Like, you see how I can.
Yes.
There's something you need to do
Yeah,
first.
pretty much.
It's important that you're following directions closely.
Did you read that sex?
Yeah.
Okay. So, open.
Yeah.
Open file.
That's fine.
So first of all, so those files are not here. That's clear? So now
My parents are the experts in there, they don't have like some weird.
Because what I've seen is if the files are already here.
There's some weird thing that, you know, they're out like worse or you ready to the people.
So if they're already there, it fails the install. This is why we indicate the install. Okay, so now we've got them here. So the top is just make sure that they're set up right. Copy of numerator.
It was so crazy. It was like
kind of sketch when those guys are to place.
So you can see neither of these files.
Yeah, that's where they're at.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah, well, that's where they went through. They're not there now, but that's where
One of the
they.
guys,
Which is why I'm like,
this
you
guy,
don't have a problem.
Mm.
So, one thing to do for sure when removing files, what you can do, if you do, if you left drag it, it's going to automatically take these. If you right click, if you right and drag it, it's going to show us. So, for instance, we want to say, look at that ISS.
Who's our hitman?
Program file.
He said there's a street in the city.
Yeah.
There's a street in the city that you just can't cross.
So if I left click, it's just going to move it. We're going to move it. If I hold the right click, drag it over here.
Let's just do the line.
See how that shows up? These are the options. So
That's
that's
smart,
the thing
though,
to remember.
because it's
Typically when you move
before
files,
they get out,
make
you
your
can
habit
themselves and stuff.
right click, because then you get a choice.
It's not the prison system.
Otherwise, it will decide.
Oh,
something
really?
else.
Well,
Typically,
our
the way it
prison
decides it
systems do that.
is, as long as it's on the same drive, it will do a move. If it's on a different drive, then it's fine. But usually you want to kind of customize that. So, right click and drag it.
Do I bring over the Untitled?
No, so that is right there.
And do I include, you know,
So we need to include those two.
Like that, they like told us like, well, we can't, we weren't allowed to go out in the city and stuff.
And don't forget, you need to change this to right copy. See if it's right now. They're doing it.
so,
Because that's what's in the
I don't know if that'd be
dictionary.
okay.
So that's what's in the dictionary. WA, can understand it, it's Washington.
It's different.
But why the other things are showing up there?
Yeah.
EA is.
You know, if you're in Europe, you have to
the
like,
other ones.
organization and, yeah, there's
So
certain
in
things,
reality,
you have to schedule yourself, because there's so much stuff you do. Like, even like one, like, France, you know, Paris, you never interact.
Okay, so you could
And
technically go
it gets
through.
daunting, like, I was there with my entire family, I'm just like we rule.
I've been watching that, not to Europe, but like.
When you kind of look at it,
Yeah, I just
that's
looked
not
up.
big files.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we had like this flight,
So-
it was like a 10-12 hour flight just to get there.
Mhm.
And we're already jet lagged. Man, it was like 8 a.m. Paris time, like, I've been up for 17, 18 hours. So they're like, all right, let's start our day. I'm like, no, it's late, just sleep so bad right now. So we were just zombies for the
See, so
entire
now,
day.
That's good with Philippines and Russians.
it just, oftentimes you have to take in enough letters or to give you that. Okay, so we've got a spell checker in there. One thing that's worth noting in there, you'll see that, okay, it's spell checking, that much is working, but there's a lot of things like this. If I just, oh, I need to restore the files real quick. Because I don't have them in here. So go back here, open folder in File Explorer. Okay. Copy here. Okay, so copy those files. Continue. Continue. Okay. Yeah, so one thing you may be seeing, for instance, if I just type in WA, I'm not really getting good suggestions. But a lot of that has to do with all these words here are words that are actually in that US dictionary. Like, if you think here, well, WA, all uppercase, that's the state of Washington, which is why it's in there. EA is a shorthand for each. So that's why some of those things are in there. So a lot of times if you're going to use a spell checker like this, you're going to need to also go through and actually build the dictionary yourself, kind of change or customize what's in there, what words are in there. So if I actually open up enus.dic, what you'll see in there is actually, this is just a text file and it's got words. So if you wanted to say remove some words from that, you just remove the line. You can actually go through and edit this file yourself. I think that number at the top is the number of words that are in here. Yeah, so 49271. Yeah, so if you're going to remove a word, you need to update that number and things like that. So that's what you would do in a more kind of advanced setting. Does that make sense? You'd actually go through and build that dictionary and only put words in there that make sense for your application. So for instance, if I were to, let me just go to the IIS Express folder, okay? I'm going to open up both of these files.
Should we do this?
Yeah. So I'm in the IIS Express folder. I'm not on the one that is, I'm not right now looking at the one that's in my project. I'm looking at the one in IIS Express. So two things here. First, the AFF file. What you're seeing there, the AFF file has kind of replacement rules. Specifically, it deals with common errors that people make. That's what the AFF is tracking, is common spelling mistakes. So that we actually can leave as is. We don't need to do anything with the AFF. That's fine. What we do want to change is the words that are here. So for instance, if I wanted to make my own, okay, we can see the kind of format with this. We've got the number of words. We've got, for each line, we have the word, and then we have some suffix here, right? Any guess as to what that suffix is? What might that suffix be?
I'm jumping the word after the slash. Or the
What's
slash.
that after the slash?
The tracking how often the word is used.
How often the word is used?
So like,
I would say no. It's letters, right? That would only make sense if it's numbers. So a spell checker might get used for two things. Remember, it might get used for checking words. It might also get used for checking grammar, right? And if I'm going to use this dictionary to check grammar, what might I also need to know about all the words in the dictionary?
Oh, like what type of, like whether it's a noun, a verb,
Right.
adjective.
So more than likely, what we're seeing at the end of here is going to be what kind of word it is. Now, I do notice interesting that some of these don't even have that. Like wasn't doesn't have, waste doesn't. Okay. And it looks like most of these that should be a noun, I'm going to guess it looks like most of these are slash n. So anyway, what I'm going to do, I'm going to erase everything that's here. And what I'm going to put in instead is just the categories that we have. So let's see. So what categories do we have? We have soccer, or we have chess, we have soccer, we have water sports. Oh, when I hit, I'll come back to that. When I hit save, it's actually going to give me a little error like this. Says it needs to be in administrator mode. So I want to go ahead and hit yes. Go back in here. Now that I'm in admin mode, I can actually save. So So let's say I just put that in there, okay? That's my custom dictionary. And what I'm seeing here, see now it's catching as more, as better, as a better sort of suggestion. So in reality, you could even go so far as building this dictionary and then that being the only thing that you use in this web service. Does that make sense? If you're going to build your own custom dictionary, just put the words that matter. You could then skip the whole database, in fact, and get things like that. So that'll catch not just spelling errors, but other things like that.
So if we were to do that, should we remove like the...
Now, one thing it doesn't do, so if I just have those 3 words in there, oh, I guess it does still catch water sports. That still worked. See if I put in water as a separate word and sport as a separate word. So this would be 5 words. Why is it not? Oh, I guess it doesn't. Well, that's interesting. Okay, it only suggests it then. So that'd be one way. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, if we're going to use the spell checker in this fashion, should we like remove the, like what if we were to do this, would we remove like the category section?
Yeah, if you're going to do something like this, then you could actually fully remove the rest of the logic. And I probably want to put these actually in lowercase, would probably be better. But the big thing I'd want to do if I'm going to have a custom dictionary like this is I definitely would need to give it a different name. I probably wouldn't call it ENUS. I'd probably call it like sportstore.dic, if that makes sense. You know, have it be more specialized to what actually makes sense. So there's a lot that you can do with that. But the big thing that this gives us over just building it into a SQL query the way we had it, right? It gives us the option to fix spelling errors, right? Because if I leave it as is without the spell checker, if I misspell water, I just don't get any search results. I don't get any suggestions. So what that lets me do is go ahead and have some suggestions that pop up of the correct spelling, right? Rather than just saying, hey, does it include this? You know.
So when we're doing this in our other labs, do you want us to make the...
You can use the ENUS. You don't have to build your own. You don't have to build your own dictionary. All I'm trying to show you here is that you could, right? So if you wanted to build a specialized dictionary for a real-world scenario, it's really not that hard. You see, the format of this dictionary file is really very simple. So you could easily do that yourself, is build your own dictionary. But as far as what I'm going to actually ask you to do, you can just use the raw ENUS that I've given you. You don't need to do anything with that. But that's how you could make the search results better. Because again, if you remember when I just typed in WA, originally I was getting a lot of irrelevant suggestions. So by making that dictionary a lot closer, now I'm getting only search results that make sense. Okay. So that's it, right? That's really all I wanted to talk about today was how to integrate that spell checker, because we didn't have time to get to that yesterday. That should give you enough to get started on the labs. And the big thing that I've asked you, don't forget the homework's due today. So if you haven't finished that, make sure you go through that. But you should have enough to start on the labs and get those done. One thing that I didn't put on the labs, but make sure that you have handy, we talked about, remember the autocomplete types, the autofill field names? Those are really good things to go through and practice with and play around with. The only reason I didn't give those as an assignment is because we don't really have a page right now in any of the websites that we built where that's easy thing to add, right? So if we had your resume, if we have the work history, that'd be a good place to add the autocomplete types. Or if when we start building registration pages, right, when we start working with users, that'd be a good place to add those autocomplete types, but we're not really there yet, if that makes sense. So keep that on mind, keep that stored, the autofill stuff. It's because I know it's not on these labs, but I know it's something you want to know about. Okay? Any questions before I send you off on that?
Well, mine worked as well as I thought it would after adding those words.
Mm-hmm.
At least not with, so I did, like, delete all of them and put just those words in.
Well, remember the count has to change. So remove everything after sports.
Were you changing the count?
Yeah.
Oh.
So just delete everything. Your first line has to be the count. It's the number of words in the dictionary. So if you look at what I have on screen, I just have 5 because I have 5 lines in my dictionary.
Water, space, sports, it's just one.
Right. We could put in tags in there as well, anything we needed to.
Now a good time for a break.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a break. Come back.